Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and welcome to another episode of whatever this show is called, because actually I'm not entirely sure. On our channel we always put these videos under the T&E rate playlist, but I feel like we've done enough of these now that they probably deserve their own series title. What that would be, I don't know. Suggestions would be very welcome. But this is where we take a look at a new World of Warcraft cutscene or cinematic, or in this case literature, and well, we don't react to it because we did that hours ago. We don't do reaction videos. This is an analysis, a deep dive where we get in there and we get right in there, up under its skirt, and we just nerd out all over its face. Or in this case, three faces. Because today, Internet, we are looking at the new Windrunner comic strip, Three Sisters, a comic strip that you might have predicted, you might have even known the exact name of if you pay lots of attention to our cryptic light box in the back of the weekly reset episodes. And if you're not in the habit of paying attention to our cryptic light box, well, maybe you should though. That's all I'm saying. And this is a video we weren't really expecting to make because the comic strips so far that we've had in the build-up to Battle for Azeroth, the Jaina comic and the Magni comic, they've been really cool. They've been quite interesting, nicely drawn, lovely little sort of snippets, little glimpses of sort of character development for Jaina and Magni, but nothing really meaty or substantial or revelatory lore-wise. That has now all changed with the Three Sisters comic, guys. Not only is this one considerably longer than the other two, but there is some proper lore going on in this comic as well. There are some very important implications to the future of the story in World of Warcraft and Internet. Perhaps most importantly of all, there is clear foreshadowing in this comic, in my opinion, for the popular theory that we may well soon have a third faction in World of Warcraft that players can be a part of. We will explain all of this and more as we deep dive into Windrunner Three Sisters, okay? Go, 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 go. So first of all, I just want to apologise for the terrible film quality that you'll be getting on my face right now. This is our webcam that I'm using today. Our usual beautiful DSLR camera has got a dodgy lens, I think. It's not quite working. So I just dropped 200 quid on a new one, which will be here in time for the weekly reset. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we need our patrons, because stuff like this happens more than you'd imagine. One thing we will not be doing in this episode is going through every single panel and just reading through it, because that's not what this is about. Like with our cinematic videos, this is a really bad way to experience what it is we're actually talking about here. Go away, read it yourself. It's on your launcher right now. It'll be the first thing, click on it. It'll take you 10 minutes to read and it's worth it. Then you'll know what I'm talking about here. Having said that, I am going to do some voices because it's my video and I want to. And the first part is the Sister of Shadow. All of the three sisters are given their own sort of title. It's a bit like a Quentin Tarantino movie, I guess. And of course, Alleria is the Sister of Shadow, and here she is in the Valley of Heroes, is it called, in Stormwind, where Taliesin and Alleria have their own statues, of course, statues that we're all incredibly familiar with, maybe the most famous image of World of Warcraft. And it starts off, Taliesin says, "It's a good likeness of you, but they botched my nose, don't you think?" It's a joke, it's really funny. Only reason I bring up this very first frame, really, is to point out the fact that Taliesin seems to have a magically fixed sword here. You can see the clue is in the actual statue that he's looking at. His sword is supposed to be broken, and when we saw him in Legion, it was still broken, and the rest of the sword was made up of cool light that he'd obviously kind of put there using the light, and it was, you know, still half a sword, but it had cool light bits, like Agrimar's sword in the Antorus raid as well. But that seems to have just been totally fixed now. It's just a normal sword. Anyway, Alleria responds to this hilarious small talk with, "It is time, Taliesin. I must see my homeland again with my own eyes." And Taliesin, having the look of a man that has just had a pretty good joke completely ignored. It's a feeling I know all too well, and it's a face that I recognise as a result. So I'm sorry, man. But this is incredibly important to the whole setup of this story, because it's where it's revealed that the three Windrunner sisters, Alleria, Vereesa, and Sylvanas, have organised to meet up and kind of make a violent pilgrimage to Windrunner Spire and clear out all the undead there. As Alleria says, "I need to learn whether I still have a family." To which, again, Taliesin replies, "You do. It's me and our son." Arator. This dialogue between Taliesin and Alleria is as kind of sparky and friendly as you'd expect, but there's a definite undercurrent here of Taliesin wanting to help and Alleria putting her foot down really and saying, no, I don't need you for this. Something which I suspect will be happening more and more in her story as we go forward. It's then revealed that Alleria is wearing this green necklace, which is her part of the kind of triumvirate of necklaces that all of the Windrunner sisters have. I'm sure everyone remembers that incredibly famous Forsaken storyline where you take Sylvanas' necklace back to her after you found it, and she gets all emotional and the banshees come out and start singing Lament of the Highborn. This is Alleria's version of that. And so far, so good. It's all kind of as you'd expect this comic strip to be. I was sort of like half reading and not paying attention, and then this frame happens, which is when it starts getting really good. Just in the middle of the conversation, they just go into the whispers from the void always running through Alleria's head. Now, of course, we know that the void whispers always are running through Alleria's head, but it's kind of like terrifying to see them written on the page like that, just out of nowhere. Suddenly, can never be enough, prove your love, slay him and free him from the curse of the light, stop resisting, give in and become one with us, it is only a matter of time. Really ominous, relentless whispers from the void, and this shows how they're going through Alleria's head all of the time. Whenever we look at Alleria from now on, we have to picture these whispers going through her head. In this case, whispers telling her to kill her own husband. And here we see Alleria, even with these voices, these noises going through her head, inciting her to violence and to killing her loved ones, having to keep this facade of normality and love as she holds Taliesin's hand. Something which, by the way, shouldn't be able to happen. In the short story, 1,000 Years of War, it's revealed that because Alleria is now like a very strong void being and Taliesin is a very strong light being, obviously, when they try to touch, there's a very strong physical reaction. They literally get catapulted across the room from each other, which to me would explain why Alleria is not so keen on spending so much time with Taliesin anymore. But anyway, it would seem that maybe that was only a temporary thing, because here they're clearly holding hands. Who knows? And she says, if I do not return, tell Arator, I will tell our son that you love him. Just a little reminder that they do have a son, and his name is Arator. This will be quite important, not just in this comic strip, but I suspect in the story of World of Warcraft going forward. So did you get that? Arator, their son, half elf, half human. Arator. Which leads us to the Sister of Sorrow, which is quite an interesting way of referring to Vereesa Windrunner, really. But quite apt, as we'll see. She's got quite a lot to be sorry about, despite her lovely home in Dalaran here, as we see. You know, her husband was killed in Theramore. She's essentially estranged from her two sisters. The rest of her people are all essentially dead. And also, perhaps most of all, she has the most terrifying children ever born. Look at these little sprogs. These are the offspring of Vereesa, who is an incredibly beautiful high elf lady, and Ronin. So, okay, looks like if mages could be members of Nickelback, Ronin is that mage. But I still wouldn't expect his children to be so terrifying. They're terrifying because they clearly have exactly the same face. Look at them. This is like The Shining. No wonder Vereesa is so sad. Whenever she wakes up at night, her two children are probably at the foot of the bed watching her sleep. This is the freakiest picture of them though, look. And this is just an art thing, okay? But, you know, some of the... I'm not going to talk about the art style in this comic. Generally, I think it's really good, and there's some really beautiful sort of images in it. There are little moments, as some people have pointed out, where some of the proportions of the various characters are unexpected, shall we say, and I think this is one of them. But the two terrifying twins with their overly long bodies and their tiny little legs watch their mother leave through the portal. Is this what happens when humans and high elves mate? Do we need laws against this kind of thing? Because this is not right, this is not okay. And then we see Valeria meeting up with Alleria in Eversong Woods. And having just made fun of how weird and terrifying Vereesa's children look, I just want to spend a moment to appreciate how awesome Alleria looks in these scenes. I mean, she is so cool. Vereesa says, this spot, yes, uncorrupted, still innocent. And Alleria replies, as we all were long ago. because of course now she is corrupted by the void. But she assures her sister, it is under control. I have learned to quiet the voices, to sift out the lies, even in times like this. But I love these moments where you have these glimpses into her head and these constant whispers going through her head. The throne of Silvermoon is yours by right. Take it, deliver this weak one unto us, and we will grant her purpose. This weak one, Vereesa. I wonder if she really is the weakest of the Windrunner sisters. After all, she's not the cool void one, and she's not the cool undead. I wonder if Blizzard are telling us that to try and make us sympathize with her, or whether they are setting her up like that to then surprise us by doing something really awesome and cool later on. And this was one of the first major points of the comic that made me go, huh, and made me realise that we were going to have to make a standalone video for it. Vereesa says, how do you do it? As in, ignore the voices from the void. And Alleria says, my love for Arator, her son, I don't know if you remember, he is my anchor. Essentially what she's saying in this frame, and this is really important, is that she could quite easily succumb to the void and become this thing that the voices are urging her to do. Kill her husband, kill her sister, deliver the throne of Silvermoon unto the powers of the void, and all of the rest of it that we'll see later on. And she says the thing that stops her from succumbing to it is her love for Arator, her son. So imagine if something was to happen to Arator. We have now established that that would essentially be enough for Alleria to then give in, not have the strength, not have that anchor point to resist the temptations and the whispers of the void. If something was to happen to Arator, then we could well see Alleria, like pretty much every other character we've ever seen in Warcraft who has had dabblings with the void, become something incredibly evil that needs to be stopped. And basically what I'm saying is, I don't fancy your chances of not dying, Arator. I wouldn't mind betting that the next time we see Arator, he'll be wearing like a red Star Trek jersey. That dude is toast. And then we see this rather splendid image of the three Windrunner sisters frolicking in Eversong Woods with their brother, Lirath, playing on his little lute, which is lovely. Look how happy they all were. Lirath's dead now. He was killed by orcs. Sylvanas Windrunner, the sister of death, who throughout this entire strip is incredibly cheery. And this is the second part of the comic that made me go, huh, and think that we had to make this video, because those whispers that we've been seeing running through Alleria's head throughout the comic strip, those whispers are slightly different when it comes to Sylvanas. This one is dangerous. She's a threat and must be ended. Beware this one. She seeks the death of all things, all possibilities. End her threat. Murder her. Save yourself and murder her. Save the world and murder her. Interesting. Because to me, this says that for whatever reason, the void that is constantly running through Alleria Windrunner, constantly whispering to her in her thoughts. The void, which is this unstoppable force which has been built up as the new big bad of the entire world of Warcraft. The force that was powerful enough for Sir Garrus to be scared of and want to destroy all things so that the void couldn't gain control of all things. This almost ultimate destructive evil, if you will, is scared of Sylvanas Windrunner. But why? We'll come back to that. So then they walk away from their old memories in Eversong Woods and come across the great scar of scourge-infested land leading up to Windrunner Spire. And of course, Alleria wasn't here for Warcraft 3. She doesn't even really know anything about Arthas and has to be told about all this and what actually happened here. Which is where the action kicks in and the three sisters start just getting badass on some undead and clearing the way to the Spire, which is really, really impressive, isn't it? Until you remember that literally any level 5 character can do that. In fact, they'll probably run across like a new level 1 who's just started by the time they get to Windrunner Spire, you'd have thought. Here's something that level 5 people don't usually get in Eversong Woods though, a mount. Sylvanas summons these 3 undead mounts. And so this is where, with the 3 sisters introduced, them back side by side, fighting undead, and then getting on their horses for a nice relaxed road trip to Windrunner Spire. This is where, for me, the comic strip gets very Christie Golden. I mean that in a very, very good way. It's kind of like Christie Golden writing an elf version of the Canterbury Tale. Because they're trotting along and Sylvanas says, we should play a game on our journey, sisters. Which is the kind of line you always imagine Sylvanas saying, isn't it? Do you recall 1 is a lie? Each of us will make 3 statements and 2 will be true. We will not reveal which is the lie until after we retake Windrunner Spire. Which is a nice, very handy way of building up tension in these statements that they're about to make each other. Because we'll be like, oh, which are the true statements, which is the false one? It's a little bit contrived, but I like it. So Alleria goes first. She says, very well, I have missed you both terribly. The powers of the void are a tremendous gift, and I have no regrets about stepping through the dark portal so many years ago. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was reading this, and that's a statement that I assume to be untrue. Also really nice, by the way, is her void elf racial that she uses here, where she just teleports from this horse behind the treants and then stabs them with arrows in her hands. That's what she's doing, isn't she? She's got arrows in her hands, she's stabbing the treants from behind with her void form. It's awesome, and no one says a word about it. It's perfectly normal, perfectly fine. And then we have Vereesa's turn. She says, first, I believe in the blood elves. I think they can be redeemed. And this, by the way, is an elf who identifies as a high elf, saying, I believe in the blood elves. I think they can be redeemed. Which is really weird, because as Ian Hazzikostas has said, blood elves are high elves, so I don't know why someone who is a high elf would make the distinction between them. It's almost like there is an actual distinction between them, but I'm not going to get into that right now. Oh no. I really like Sylvanas' reaction to this as well, where she says, they don't need your redemption. She says, I have finally made peace with the loss of my beloved Ronin. And you're like, well, that's a lie, isn't it? Come on. And last, I fear I will lose you both forever, which is a really lovely line, because Alleria and Sylvanas are these two incredibly tortured characters who are incredibly overpowered as well when you think about it. Vereesa is the closest to normal out of any of them, and obviously me being quite normal myself, that makes me identify with her a lot more than either of the other two. And Sylvanas' three statements are, first, there are times I wish I was still alive. Second, I am proud to be war chief of the Horde. And last, I will never betray you, my sisters. A very ominous one. Which one do you think is the false statement, guys? They find themselves in Golden Mist Village, where Vereesa does not want to go, because there are shades of like all of their old friends and family and rangers and just people hanging around here who they're going to have to kill. Next time you start a new Blood Elf character, this area is going to be incredibly boring to quest through. There are no NPCs left. The Windrunner sisters have destroyed them all, and they really do as well. I mean, they mercilessly kill them. Sylvanas goes all Banshee like she does in the BFA cinematic, but whereas in the BFA cinematic she goes Banshee and then she kind of like turns into like mist and like flies around just through people, killing them. Here she just turns all purple and then just starts rather crudely ripping the innards out of undead shades, which is really weird, and you can see the look of disgust on both of her sisters' faces as she does this completely unnecessary slaughter. What's wrong with arrows, Sylvanas? Why do you have to hold them by the hair and tear out their innards, Sylvanas? Why do you have to do that? You didn't have to do that, Sylvanas. That's weird. And Alleria's whispers are getting quite desperate at this point. She is a violation. She serves the true enemy. Kill her now. Kill her now. Remove her from this world and take from her what you need. Now. Like really desperate whisperings. These are not like the confident, if relentless whispers that are usually in Alleria's head. These have a real sense of like urgency and nervousness about them as well. She serves the true enemy, which might be the most important line in this entire comic. Who is the true enemy of the void? We'll come back to that in a second. And in the next frame after the Void Whispers have just referred to Sylvanas as a violation, Sylvanas turns around and refers to Alleria as an abomination, a vessel for the Void's power. And she's kind of right. They're both kind of right. And then Vereesa's all like, no, stop it. I hate it when you argue. You were my heroes. We have all lost so much. Must we lose everything again? And it's this dressing down from their baby sister that makes Sylvanas and Alleria kind of just back off and get on with their mission of going to Windrunner Spire. And here it is! No level 1s running around, just undead shades that the three sisters maim on their way up to the top of the tower, where we reach the dramatic climax of their game. It is time to end the game. I'll go first. The lie is that I have moved past Ronin's death. I see him every day in my sons. Are you sure it's Ronin that you see in your sons, Vereesa? Or could it perhaps be Jigsaw from the Saw movies? Maybe that's what's keeping you up at night. She says, I envy you your time with Taliesin, Alleria. And Alleria says, do not. Much has happened. I wonder if our love can survive what we have each become. does anyone else get the feeling that Alleria is not as into the relationship with Turalyon as Turalyon is? I mean, I know 1,000 years is a long time. I know that, you know, when you've been with someone that long, they probably do little things that annoy you every now and then, like always going on about the light and praying to the light and loving the light and having gold eyes and always doing what the Naru says and stuff like that. Those little things that annoy you in long-term relationships. But Alleria is pretty much flat out saying here, like, we're probably screwed, guys. This is probably the end for us. The lie is that the Void's powers are a gift. They are not. It is a relentless struggle, but one I win. And this is actually a really interesting line for me, because I always assumed, and in the speech that you've had with Alleria on the Vindicar, after all of the stuff in the Seat of the Triumvirate happens and things like that, she's quite happy with the way the Void has touched her and given her these powers, and she's wary of it, but she does kind of embrace it, and she is kind of confident that she can keep it under control. Same in the short story as well. And this is kind of the first time really where she says, this is kind of like a curse in many ways. It's a constant struggle, but it's one that I win, as long as Arator is still alive. As long as nothing happens to Arator, her son, the one wearing the red Star Trek jersey, then she'll be absolutely fine and she won't turn into an evil void creature, an abomination. That definitely won't happen as long as Arator is alive. And then she says, your turn, sister, and Sylvanas says, no, I think we're done. Yeah, great. GG, Sylvanas. Alleria says there is nothing for us in this place, but Lirath, their brother, would have wanted us to try. I fought for 1,000 years, believing my family could still be here when I returned, but my family is broken, here and in Stormwind. Oh, Turalyon, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Turalyon, with your lovely grey hair and your beautiful scar and your awesome armour. Alleria's not really into this, is she? And they drop their necklaces, the ones that they've all kept through life and death and being separated. They drop them through the shades of their past selves that exist in Windrunner Spire here. And the shade of Lirath is like, no, what's happening? And it's like those memories, those people that they used to be, those sisters who are incredibly close, kind of disappear, evaporate as a result of that. This is very symbolic, I guess, because they're leaving their necklaces in the tower, and those three sisters, the ones that spent all that time together and loved each other, they don't exist anymore. And Lirath is pretty sad about that, as you'd imagine. As I'd imagine we all are. This is one of my favourite moments of the entire comic, actually. Vereesa approaches Sylvanas, who's making her way, and she says, there's one last thing I must say to Sylvanas. I wanted to tell you that I was a coward. You asked me to stay with you. I said yes, and then all I did was send you a letter to refuse. And I love these shots of Sylvanas here. When Vereesa first approaches her from behind, we see a close-up of her eyes, and she looks angry. She looks full of rage, which is replaced instantly with surprise, and then what looks like some kind of remorse, some kind of sadness or vindication maybe, who knows, from Vereesa. But these three frames of Sylvanas' face are just great. They're just really, really nice, and it's an incredibly generous, selfless act of Vereesa to say these things to her as well. That must have hurt you. Whatever has passed between us, and whatever will, I am sorry. I hope one day you can forgive me. And she cries real tears, internet, real tears flowing down her beautiful elf face. And she doesn't wait for a response. She walks away, and she leaves Sylvanas, whose hand stays by her side for reasons that we'll see just a couple of frames later. Alleria doesn't even say goodbye, but does glance back at her sister as they travel through the void portal. And that's when, Sylvanas' rangers appear out of the trees, and they say, my lady, we were waiting, but you did not give the signal. Sylvanas was planning to betray her sisters, to have them murdered or captured, maybe so they could be raised as undead, and they could all live together in Undercity. Maybe she sees it as an act of love. It's definitely a betrayal, which means that Sylvanas was telling the truth in the other two statements. She does miss being alive, even though she often says that she doesn't, and also that she is proud to be the war chief of the Horde. A fact that I think we could all do well to bear in mind and just keep there in our heads as the events of Battle for Azeroth unfold. I think that's incredibly important. We then have two terrifying frames to finish off the story of the other two sisters. We have Alleria returning home to Turalyon and Arator. This is Arator, by the way. We've done a whole video about him as being the child of light and shadow, because, you know, obviously Taliesin is full of light, Valeria is full of shadow, is Arator, the child of light and shadow from the prophecy. I feel like now we know him being alive is the only thing that's keeping Alleria from turning into a terrifying void beast. He might be even more important than we gave him credit for in that video. And as they have their happy family reunion, the family that Alleria has literally just described as being broken here in Stormwind, with the purple light from the void portal shining, haloing all three of them, and the whispers back at it constantly in Alleria's head. This is nothing, you should have destroyed her. Now it is too late. You have sacrificed greatness for false feelings. They will leave you. You will watch as she claims them. And Alleria just being a little bit too happy on the outside to make up for these crazy whispers in her head. But not as scary, obviously, as these two demon children that Vereesa goes home to. Less about them, the better. In the final frames of the comic, Sylvanas removes the undeath from their three steeds, leaving them just a crumpled heap of bones on the floor. And she says, they will serve death. They will serve me. So Vereesa's rather heartfelt apology to Sylvanas would seem enough for her to have held off the planned murder of her three sisters. But the plan is still in place, fam. The plan to kill them is still there. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the comic. But what does it all mean? Well, the main thing for me has to be these whispers from the void, and particularly those whispers to Alleria regarding Sylvanas. And there are three, I think, that pertain to Sylvanas throughout the comic series. So let's just go back and look at those once more, because they lead into quite an important sort of train of thinking, I feel. As soon as she sees Sylvanas, the whispers say, this one is dangerous, she is a threat and must be ended. Beware this one, she seeks the death of all things, all possibilities. End her threat, murder her, save yourself and murder her, save the world and murder her. Now, this is where we establish that the void is really freaked out by Sylvanas. Sylvanas puts the shit up the void enough for it to go absolutely crazy in Alleria's head in a way that it doesn't usually. She seeks the death of all things, all possibilities. When Locust Walker, the ethereal who studies the shadow and kind of works as Alleria's mentor, describes the void to Alleria, he says the light is one strict path, whereas the void see every possibility. It's kind of like chaos, if you will. But then, would that mean she has more in common with the light than the void, Sylvanas? I think it means that she's neither of those things, of course, and she's her own third separate thing. This is why the shadow is so freaked out by her. Sylvanas is not light, Sylvanas is not shadow, Sylvanas is undeath. But what does that mean? Let's go down to the second whisper that pertains to Sylvanas. She is a violation. She serves the true enemy. Kill her now, kill her now. Remove her from this world and take from her what you need. Now, now, now. So this is awesome. She is a violation. She serves the true enemy. Now, I think most of us would assume that the true enemy to the void is the light, but this would seem to suggest otherwise, because Sylvanas, she's a lot of things, but she's not a being of the light, is she? She never has had any connection to the light, even when she was alive, and now she certainly doesn't. She is the undead Banshee Queen after all. And if whatever Sylvanas represents is the true enemy, then that means the light isn't the true enemy, doesn't it? Of the void, at least. So who is the true enemy that Sylvanas serves? Well, I guess the obvious answer would be death, wouldn't it? In Chronicle, it describes the kind of the raison d'etre, the grand emotive of the void to consume all life. I guess if death has already taken a hold before they get there, there's no life to consume. And going back to that final whisper, this is nothing, you should have destroyed her, now it is too late. You have sacrificed greatness for false feelings. They will leave you. You will watch as she claims them. And I guess the whispers here are talking about Alleria's family. Maybe Vereesa, but certainly Taliesin and Arator. And we all know what happens if something happens to Arator. And this is interesting because it's kind of a prophecy. It's literally saying now, it is too late. These events are set in motion. You will lose these people. Now, with all of these whispers, obviously, it's worth mentioning that they come from the void. They are lies a lot of the time. They are designed to get what they want out of the person they are whispering to. So in one respect, it's kind of pointless to even think about the words that the void are saying, because they can so easily be dismissed or explained as just being lies in the first place. But that's never stopped us having a lot of fun with those prophetic whispers from Il'gynoth in the Emerald Nightmare, and it's not going to stop us having a lot of fun with these. So the question is, if Sylvanas and possibly death represents the true enemy of the void as opposed to the light, then suddenly we've got a triumvirate of enemies, haven't we? Whereas before, everything seemed to be gearing up towards a void versus light kind of face-off, really. You had your army of the light and the Naru, you have your old gods and your void lords on the other side. Now we have this third one, which is death in there as well, the true enemy, which makes me think. A little while ago, before Battle for Azeroth was released, we made a video speculating how in the future Blizzard might do away with the Horde and Alliance, but keep the two factions structure, instead having it as being Shadow and Light. The idea being that you could then start any race of character that you wanted and then choose which faction that they were going to be on. You weren't sort of restricted. You know, you'd start a new elf of whatever sort and you'd make the decision as you started the elf which faction, Light or Shadow, you would join. We thought that was kind of like a natural progression. Then BFA was announced at BlizzCon. Obviously it's very, very Horde versus Alliance faction warfare. But the more time goes on, the more I think there might have actually been something in that video. I think the only way to kind of justify all of this Horde versus Alliance stuff is for there to be a massive change at the end of it. Because you can't necessarily have a winner between Horde and Alliance, but you can have a big seismic change. And lots of people are thinking that might be a third faction. And for me, this comic seems to suggest that that could be a very, very real possibility. Whether it be Light, Shadow, and Death, or whether you keep Horde, Alliance, and then a third faction that Sylvanas may then start herself. Who knows? And obviously there is no way of knowing, but for me, after this, it's never been more likely in my thinking that we could have a third faction in World of Warcraft. For me, this comic strip does a lot of the groundwork towards making that happen. I've said before that I think Sylvanas will walk away from the Horde at some point, possibly as part of some big sacrifice that she has to make to save everyone, and I could see her heading up to Northrend with the rest of the Forsaken that stay with her, maybe setting up a whole new Lichkin expansion with Bolvar, maybe even seeing Sylvanas become the Lich Queen at the end of that, and the creation of a third faction. And no, I'm not putting that faction in Northrend just because I'm desperate for Tuskars to be a race, although I'd be lying if that hadn't occurred to me. Oh, so there we have it, guys. 3 sisters. So much interesting stuff in that comic. Some really nice character work to set us up for BFA and the story of the Windrunner sisters throughout the expansion, and some tantalizing glimpses into what could be in the future. But what do you think? What does this mean? What is happening with the Void and whoever Sylvanas represents and the Light? Where is this going to go in the future? How dead exactly is Arator? How long is he going to survive? I don't think it's going to be a long, fulfilling life, put it that way. Or am I completely wrong and you need to tell me how wrong I am in the comments? Please do. I need to know how wrong I am. But thank you for joining us today. If you like this video, don't thank us. No, seriously. Thank our patrons who give their actual real life money to make these videos happen. Thank you, patrons. Thank you. Constant ridiculous expenses to keep this stupid channel going, you know. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is Antonio Bifulco. Just wanted to say that name out loud. No, my name is Taliesin from me and Evertel. Until next time, cheerio.